Надежда, секундарная профессиональная институт школа приватных специалистов, Сирии, школа. Если я носитель профессиональной школы, мы можем делать тренинг школы интенсив, бизнес-линк, education бизнес-линк, recting group, in школу шумениор на Британии мало. Не прекош кеми чуар на Британии мало, институт школа приватная, Kings01Day02 pastor kazan borsa scholarship për mësues anglisht. Dhe një nga këta është pedagogja Mirela që ka shkuar 2-3 javë në Kings. Nick është menaxher rajonal i Kings Group. Tim është drejtori i studimeve në Kings London. Andy është drejtori i departamentit në Business Link Albania. Janet është drejtori i studimeve në Oxford. Pra, keni ekspertët më të mirë, domethënë mira s'ka punë, po keni nga më të mirë, nga më ekselentët në diskusionin tuaj.
An unbroken relationship with Albania which goes back beyond 1998. We've prepared many Albanian students for university success in the UK, and we've also welcomed Albanian teachers and teachers from many other countries on immersion and methodology courses in the UK. Today we're delighted to be here to share our expertise and classroom experiences and to hear about yours as well. On my right, Tim Fernandez-Bonner is our Director of English Courses at King's London. In the centre is Andy. Andy Zidane Mihailovic, I hope I got that right. You might guess from his name he's neither Albanian nor English, but he's a very well-travelled man. He hasn't travelled quite so far to be here today. He is the head of English at Educational Business Links Department. He's lived and worked in a dizzying variety of countries around the world, but now he's settled in Albania, where he's working at Educational Business Links, and in his spare time, an IELTS examiner at the British Council. Finally, last but not least, as we say in England, our first speaker of the day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeanette Lindsay-Clark, our Director of Studies at King's Oxford. She had a long stint of teaching abroad in Indonesia, 17 years, 7 years of which I'm very jealous to say was in Bali. Before that she worked at a number of schools in Oxford, and she's going to be speaking later on about speaking techniques in the classroom, but she's going to kick off with the professional life cycle of teachers, seemingly one of the longest human professions in the world. So I'm going to hand over to Jeanette. Maybe you give them a warm welcome, a round of applause.
In real life. So, the one I'm going to talk to you about today has been looked at mainly by a researcher who interviewed many teachers. Interviewed around 1,000 teachers and did about 5 hours of interviews with each of these teachers. All of these teachers had been teachers for between 1 and 40 years. So these were very long, in-depth interviews with teachers at different stages of their teaching lives. Now, when we look at these stages, remember that they are just typical of teachers at each stage, but not necessarily true for everyone. Okay? This is what should be happening. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening to you in this stage of your career. Okay, so we look at the first stage, 1 to 3 years. Who in this room is in that category who's been teaching for about 1 to 3 years? Anybody? No? You're all more experienced than that. Oh, a few of you. Okay, a few of you are. Good. Okay. All right, well, the main theme that emerges here for teachers in that first stage of their career, this is what a lot of teachers have said in their early stages, and And it's a reality shock. The workload is huge, often very overwhelmed by the amount of preparation they have to do. I don't know if perhaps some of you remember this, whether you agree with this, but I can remember as well very early on as a teacher spending 3 hours getting ready for just one lesson. There were some nights like that, and a lot of what they learnt on the courses doesn't seem to work, and you're really struggling to survive very much in those first few years. There can be a lot of insecurity, and the behaviour often of teachers can be sometimes over informal with students, because they're not necessarily that much older than their students. They often see their students as friends and try to create more friendships with students, or because they're worrying very much about control, they can sometimes be overly strict and overly rigid. There can be a lot of frustration for new teachers as well, because you can often be in an environment with a lot of very experienced people, or teachers who've been teaching for many years, who have families and children, and they're not really interested in your life and what you're going through. But it's not all negative for those first few years. There's also a lot of discovery, finding out more about your students. You've got your class. Teachers talk about my students, my class, and that's a nice experience to have as well. And a lot of teachers in this age can have very good, friendly relationships with their students. Okay, but if you're in that phase and you're not struggling, be very pleased, okay, because most people do. Right, let's have a look at, so what do you do in this stage? Especially, those of us who are in positions where you've got director of studies, or you're in any kind of managerial position. How do you help teachers like that? One of the main things is to make sure that you observe and talk to experienced teachers of English as much as you can. Speak to your director of studies and ask if you can go in and do some observations. They should be able to arrange that for you. Ask to be observed. You should be observed and get some feedback, no matter how painful it is. You should make sure you do that. There are lots of lesson plans and ready-made things. Two that I use quite a lot and encourage teachers to use are, you may know these, the British Council website, Teaching English, has a lot of lesson plans on. You may already know that. One Stop English also has a lot. You can ask your institutions as well. This is better. There's two versions. There's a free version, and there's a version that you have to pay a little bit for as well. Keep the longer term view of your career in mind. Where do you want to be in 4 or 5 years' time? What can you do to help? What can you do now to help you achieve those longer term goals? You're better able just to change from your plan and do something completely different. But also, it's time to think a little bit about, shall I specialise in something? Some of you are primary, perhaps some of you primary school teachers here. Some kind of route that you are interested in. Start thinking about what you might specialise in. Okay? Be involved regularly in workshops, attend workshops like you're doing today, okay? Read articles, try out new ideas. You've done a lot of pair work, so you try not to do pair work. Maybe you haven't used students in groups very much. Now's a good time to do that. You try different grading systems, perhaps, for your students. Different ways of helping students with speaking. You try lots of different things. And what this is called, I quite like this term, this is by the researcher who did a lot of these interviews, it's called pedagogical tinkering. Now, have you heard the word tinkering before. It's quite a nice word. It means not doing something in a big way, not doing it something in a big, just doing it in a small way. So, for example, on a Saturday, you might do a bit of tinkering in the garden. That means maybe you just go into your garden and you do a little bit of work, just little bits here and there. And that's what a lot of teachers are doing in this stage. Now, I'll come back to this point later, because it's quite an important one, actually, this idea of pedagogical tinkering. I'll come back to that a bit later at the end of the talk. But that's... Just move on a bit there. The other teachers, also at this stage, get a lot more what we call activism. Now that means moving perhaps outside the classroom more. They start seeing the limitations of the place they're in. They might start moving to a different place, a place that offers them more opportunities. This is often the time when teachers start thinking, oh, maybe I can go for promotion. Maybe I can get a better job now, go beyond what I'm doing. The more ambitious people might be more activist in this sense. They might be the people who are giving conferences, giving workshops. The less ambitious people might be more involved in the pedagogical tinkering in the classroom. Okay. It's also, at this stage, teachers find they're very good at educational psychology. Maybe you haven't read about it necessarily, but you've often developed a natural intuition and instinct about how people learn and how best to help people learn. Even if perhaps you're not someone who's read lots of articles, you've got enough experience to know this for yourself. And the more activist people are often also very interested in their own professional development at this stage. But it's not all good in this stage, okay? About half the teachers might be experimenting or involved in activism, but there's also a more negative side to this stage once you get beyond 7 years teaching, okay? There's a lot of reassessment and self-doubt. A lot of people in this stage start saying, what am I doing? Am I in the wrong job? There can be that feeling as well. You know, I didn't mean to be a teacher, but here I still am. There are a lot of teachers thinking that. And they can go into a bit of a crisis. They feel, oh, I've been in teaching, now I can't do something else. I can't go and do anything else. I've got to stay in teaching now. So there can be that phase as well. There can be a lot of burnout, exhaustion as well. Just feeling endlessly tired, okay? Negative feelings about students, negative feelings about the place you've worked. So teachers can go one of two ways here at this stage. You can go to being more active in your classroom, trying new things, or you can also go to this phase. Now remember, of course, you're all here today, which you're all here on a Saturday. So you are probably in the other group, in the first group, aren't you? You're in the group of people who are still quite actively interested in your teaching and what you're doing. But perhaps you know that that's not the case for everybody in teaching, okay? And they start to feel over-routinized, they feel they're doing the same things over and over again. Still feeling constantly tired and constantly stressed. And a sign of a teacher who's like that, like this, is often a lot of negative comments. Oh, you know, oh, this place, oh, it's them, it's their fault. Lots of comments like that. Okay, so I just want to think about this stage a little bit. One of more chilling findings of this research is that teachers quite often didn't get themselves out of this stage, this negative feeling. They stayed in this stage. What I'd like you to do is just for a moment with the person next to you, if you are a teacher who's been teaching this length of time and you're feeling a bit like this, what can you do? What can you do to get yourself out of this? How can you find resolution to this? How can you get out of this negative state of mind? Okay? Just with your partner, just for 1 minute, can you think of anything that teachers can do? Okay, all right. I won't ask you to tell me things. There'll be opportunities for you to talk a lot more later in the day, but perhaps you had to think about a few things. Of course, one answer, one resolution is to leave. Yeah, do something else. If you feel like that, leave, or go part-time, or take on more interests outside the job. But generally, I think we need to think about perhaps, colleagues like this, or other teachers like this. We need to help them get out of these phases. And there are various things you can do. One thing is to start, because you've got plenty of experience, is to start mentoring, helping newer teachers. That can often help people get out of this phase. Push yourself, really, to develop new knowledge and skills. It's easy to think, well, I'm quite good, I can do this now, and not develop new things, but that can keep you stuck in a rather negative phase. So keep developing new knowledge and skills. Do lots of small-scale classroom research. Try out different things. You can. You've got the opportunity to do that. Try different groupings, different materials. Try new materials. Try a new book. Try some new online materials. Make sure you stay flexible and responsive to changes. This is something that affects people more perhaps later on in later stages as well. Read articles. Okay. All right, so you need to get yourself out of that stage. And if you're a director of studies of any sort, you need to think about helping your teachers get out of being more negative. Remember, not all teachers go that way, but there are one of two paths. Okay, the last part, 19 to, well, actually no, sorry, this is not the last one, second to last. 19 to 30 years. Okay, I'm going to put my hand up here. Anybody here in this phase? You all look quite young, actually, so maybe not. All right, one thing that happens here on the, I'll put them all up actually, on the more positive side are these things here. Firstly is one of relational distance. You're older now, so teachers of this age tend to take on a more paternal or maternal role. That means that, and I think this is very true, students no longer come and talk to you about what they did at the weekend, but they will come and talk to you for advice, and they will come and tell you perhaps more personal problems that they wouldn't want to tell a younger person. And I have found this to be true, that as you become older as a teacher, you are viewed more maternally or paternally by your students. Teachers who have gone through this phase often are more relaxed in class. They're very self-accepting. When things go wrong, you don't blame yourself. It's just a bad day, okay? And a term often used for teachers in this stage is serenity. That means sort of calm and happy, okay? That's on the positive side. So many teachers, after teaching this long, these are the kind of adjectives that describe them. But of course there's the other side too. We've got to think about, remember those teachers who were negative in the early stages and they remained negative? In this later stage, a less pleasant route is conservatism, minimal effort, and nostalgia, being very nostalgic. Now, what that tends to mean is teachers in this space can often make comments about pupils, things like, oh, students, they just can't spell these days. Students these days, they can't concentrate for more than 2 seconds. It wasn't like that 20 years ago. I don't want to know what Facebook is. What's this Twitter rubbish? You know, comments like that are connected with conservatism. There's also a tendency for minimal effort. I know what to do now, I'm not going to change it, this is how I teach. Nothing will make me change. And, as I said, nostalgia, looking back, thinking that things were much better in the past. There are some schools, particularly in America, there was an interesting project where they recognise this happening to teachers who've been in the profession for a long, long time, and they do little courses trying to help them get